Welcome to Soul Conversations with Sandra. Welcome, 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 the podcast. We are starting today, this beautiful Friday, with Brad, the life coach, and he'll be with us soon. Matter of fact, he's waving at me now. So let's get started. Let's invite him in. I'm excited. I'm so excited. I
Hello,
just can't
my friend.
hide it. I'm so excited. Hello, my friend. Hello,
How are you
hello. How are
doing?
How you doing? Um, are you muted?
No, I should not be. Am
Oh,
I talking?
oh, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
I think Instagram has to work on that one because a true conversation is when two people are talking at the same time. They're multitasking and they're getting everything, right?
Totally. I totally agree.
Wonderful. You know what? I know that we said we're going to keep it to an hour. I have a load of questions. I mean, literally, right? But the thing is because when we talk, sometimes we jump into different, and I don't want to confuse them when they start coming through. But I know I do want to talk about a few things. First, oh, I want you to let everyone know who you are, how you came to be who you are, and how you came to do what you do. And that might be the whole hour. And I really don't it because I know it's going to cover all of this.
Right. That's true. Okay, so first of all, let me thank you. Thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this conversation, so I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. Um, yeah, okay, so my name is Brad Clausman. I am a former pastor of 20 plus years. Left the church 3 years ago. I was, now backtrack, I was born and raised to be in the church. I am a people-pleasing middle child, which means I never veered to the right or the left, just right down the middle, right? And so I was a good boy. I was a good Baptist boy, all right, Southern Baptist boy, that was ridden by guilt and sought affirmation from family members, church members, and therefore was right in line with religion, right? And so I grew up. I knew I was going to ministry at age 8. I accepted the call at age 15. Went to a Christian college. Graduated with a biblical studies degree. Went ahead and married another Christian girl or woman. Went to seminary. Throughout seminary, I was studying and graduated with my master's, all the while doing internships and everything throughout church. It was steeped very much in every aspect of my life. Like people that are like my really, really good friends know how screwed up, they can make you. So, really, really, really. And so I was steeped in that. Had a call into ministry, went into ministry. Have been in every job within ministry except lead pastor because I didn't want to, even though I was sort of in that for just a few months, but I didn't want to. I never wanted to be the one speaking on stage. Um, I have two amazing kids. My kids are critical thinkers and wonderful and beautiful people. I started having problems with the church early and deconstructing. I started having issues with the way in which they viewed women, misogyny. I didn't like the way in which love was expressed, meaning their definition of love and how it didn't match up with what I felt like Scripture was saying.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a difference there. I had trouble with obviously some of the theological teachings, and I really wrestled with the all-knowing, all-caring, all-loving God, especially after my wife and I had a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't rationalize mentally what the God of the Bible was like to what I was dealing with, right? And then I started deconstructing the LGBTQ plus community. I didn't like the way the churches were treating them. And so I was wrestling with all of that, and it was taking a toll on my health.
Yeah.
At some point, after 20 plus years, finally I was like, you know what? I don't know if my body can sustain this, because quite frankly, I got type 2 diabetes. I wasn't sleeping. I was not, my mind was racing, and the doctor said, hey, you might want to look for a different job. And then my counselor said, you might want to look for a different job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, how often are they on the same page? Right. So I think that's probably true. And then the most amazing thing happened, which brought all clarity to me, was my daughter, when she was in middle school, on a Sunday morning in a small group, decided to come out to the small group that she was a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
Never told us any of this. And I was like, and I didn't know it. So I had all these people coming up to me and going, hey, I want you to know we're praying for your daughter. We're going to be here to support you. And I'm thinking, what the hell's going on, right?
Right.
Like, okay, that's great. Thank you for praying for it. Can I ask why? Like, what happened? And one of the teachers came up to me like, hey, just want you to know that your daughter came out as lesbian this morning, and so we're basically going to try to fix her.
Right.
And when I heard that, I was like, my daughter doesn't need to be fixed.
Right.
And so that's not going to happen. So being a father and considering my children more important than any religion,
Right.
I was like, my first mind is, how do I protect my family? Because it has just came to my realization, right there, blunt force trauma right in front of my face, that says, well, shit, this is what the church tries to do.
Right.
This is how they treat the youth. And it should have hit me before that, because quite frankly, I was the family life pastor. So I oversaw everything that happened in children's and students and young adults and all that. But it finally hit me then, and to the point to where it was time for me to walk away.
Right.
Which was incredibly challenging, because it's all I ever knew. It's all I was ever trained on.
Right.
And so I left, and have been, and for the first year, just went to counseling. I got hooked up with an atheist counselor, because I didn't have any agendas to come.
Okay. That's a good path. That's a good start, because they have no desire to have it turn out one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'd only been to Christian counselors, right? And so I went that route. I got a job in a cigar shop lounge, and just started kind of like answering those questions within myself that said, hey, what do I like? Why do I make this decision? Every decision I made, I asked, why am I doing this? And a lot of times it was because I was trained to do that within the religion, right? Because what people don't understand is, a lot of times when they leave religion, it's not always about the theology. Sometimes it is. But what comes out is, how do I view marriage? What do I view as sacred anymore? What do I really like?
As sacred. Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everything changes. And in changing that, I had a real self-discovery time and really deconstructing my life. And when I became, I wouldn't say comfortable, it was like, okay, now I want to help people through what I have been through. I started becoming a life coach, right? When I got certified, and I used my experience of, hey, what's behind the curtain of churches? Why do they operate the way they do? What's their system structure? How do we implement, or how did churches implement a guilt structure, as well as how do they run their music and the reasons they do their music the way it is, the words in the song, all of those types of things. And so I've been a life coach for about 1.5 years.
Right.
Love it. Love the people I've gotten to meet, and that's what I'm doing now, with the future of moving to New York City, which I'm excited about. And meeting.
From.
What's that?
Where will you be moving to New York City from?
From Maryland.
Oh,
About
okay.
3.5, 3:45 away, if traffic's nice to you.
Or if you're nice to traffic, it can be
Right.
right. Right. Well, there was one thing that you said well, wait a minute. There's the whole gambit of what you said just stood out. So, but the one thing that you said when I was doing earlier in my life, because I have always been asking these intuitive questions that just drove all the adults nuts. And like we've talked before, my mother would let me do it. She would just let me ask these embodying questions. She would say, hey, babe, I don't have the answer for you. Put her hands on her hips and tilt her head and go, but go out and find it. Go ahead. There's an answer somewhere. What suits. Every time she saw me look a certain way, she would say, oh, okay, you got another question. But it was not a question that bothered her. It was a question that bothered every other Christian adult around her. It's like my mother's name was Anne. They would say, Anne, are you going to let her ask those type of questions? Because when stuff didn't make sense, it didn't make sense. It's like, for me, it's like, how could a God that they're giving to us say that God loves everything and everyone, and then we're picking and choosing who can come to church? We're telling them to come, but if they show up with no shoes, they can't come in. If they show up in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans that they slept in all night because they sleep on the street, they can't come in. And I just didn't get that. Now that's when I was growing up. Fast forward to about year 30, when I was making my transition from, to becoming a born again, and I'll say it, Christian. And we were still doing that. So it's like, wait a second, we've got all these scenarios that say we're good Christians, but there's an and, if, and a but in the perimeter of everything. And you've got to be right in the middle to be a good little Baptist girl or a good a Christian, born again Christian, because it's now I can't listen to secular music, and I have to monitor what Christian music I'm allowing my kids to listen to.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely. It's okay to ask questions within, right? So as long as you don't ask those questions outside of the box, but you stay within it and get the answers that are within the box, it's okay to ask those questions. I think your mom was awesome in letting you seek out and explore those questions and ask them. And I love the fact that she let you do that.
Yeah, she just was like, oh, you got that question? Oh, okay, go girl. But, she was, she was pulling up the rear. I didn't know she was pulling up the rear. I didn't know those were questions that I shouldn't be asking. Nor do I think that my mother ever thought that those questions were going to be detrimental to herself or any of her children. Because she was already outside of the norm of what Christianity was preaching, because she was a single mother. She was a divorced single mother. And she chose not to go back into the church to find a good Christian man to help raise her kids. Right? So she was already outside the box. But she still wanted her family was inside the church, and her family wasn't leaving the dynamics of that church. So she fit in where, what is that saying? You got to fit in where, you got to get in where you fit in. So she kind of fit in, and her thing was she go sing, she go, listen to the sermon, and then she come right home. She wouldn't talk to people. She wouldn't, that wasn't her area of liking. It's not she liked people, she just didn't like the bullshit and the gossip. Right?
Yeah.
Christians say that they're nowhere near it, but they're the ones that lead the charge, right?
Yep.
Okay, so when you found out, you said that was, you left the church 3 years ago. So in your deconditioning, where did you start with, besides the counseling?
I actually started deconstructing, but it started doing it silently around 2003.
2003.
Yeah, I started deconstructing then, but there was no one else to talk to, right? Because you're a pastor, your field of being able to talk to anybody, including other pastors, is very narrow.
Right.
If they heard the thoughts are coming out of my head, they would have been like, no, something's wrong. We need to get you into Christian counseling, right?
Right.
And then my career at that point was gone, right?
Right.
And I just figured that, hey, I was having a faith crisis or something, because that's what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had to walk through this faith crisis. And so I'd walk through one issue and find out that I believe something different, only to walk into another issue and find out that I believe something different, right? And so it kept on going that direction. And what really changed is I started reading things that I was not supposed to be reading, right? Other ideas, questions, concept, whatever have you. And my beliefs were all the while further and further apart than what I thought they should be, or how they began when I was a teenager. And so they started quietly within my own head. I love these people that are joining, by the way. They're all smart. So, I love them. So anyway, so I struggled because it was just me. And then I discovered, and I saw that my wife was deconstructing.
Oh.
But she actually, I think, probably started before me. And she would ask, hey, is it okay if I do this, if I do that? I'm like, yeah, sure, I don't care. If I was a godly man, a man of faith, I would look and go, no, you can't do that.
Right.
Right? That's not right. That's not spiritual. That's not godly spiritual. Right? So, but she kept pushing, and that created a space for me to as well be able to interject and have conversations with things I was thinking of. And so that was a little more freeing, but it's was incredibly challenging still, just because I'm in the church, right? I'm a pastor of the church. I have certain responsibilities. I have certain things I got to do. And so I still kept a lot of it quiet, and from everybody, until eventually I was like, okay, I'm discovering things about myself. I need to start becoming who I am, or who's been repressed. I need to let that person out and see what happens. And it's probably not going to be pretty.
Yeah. That's my whole childhood, right? Just the questions and, pushing the boundaries of the questions and asking, well, why do I have to do this? And why is it only that the women and girls of the church do this way, and then guys get to, just have the gambit of the glory of God, right? Mm-hmm. Women and little girls get the glory of man, physical man.
Yeah.
But man gets the glory of God.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it wasn't that I was asking about it because somebody was abusing me or any of this. I just saw an injustice, or not injustice. I'll put it this way: an unequal balance of the sharing of the Almighty God. And my thing is, if you're telling me that's the way God expects it, then why would I want to be present in a place, in the first place, in the presence of God that's unjust and unequally balanced? Well, he's not almighty then. And, if I just called God instead of he, then I got ostracized because it's you've got to call him a he, because that's personality.
Yeah.
They're giving God a personality like man gives himself personality. And I was just like, no, that doesn't sound right to me, you know. And my first thing was, is it only in the Baptist church that they do this? And my mother would go, well, go somewhere else and find out if they do that, you know. And my mother would say, you know, it can't be just for one Sunday, Sandra. You have to sit there and you have to observe. And even then, I mean, now I understand it now, but then she was always going, you can't judge, you have to observe. You can't go in with, and I was a little kid, she says, you can't go in with an opinion already. You can go in with a question, but not an opinion. And that was the hardest thing for me to do, because I had already, you know, I'm telling you, if anything, the Baptist church, and I don't care whether it's Northern or Southern Baptist churches, they are some really strong, you know, powerful, what I would call entity to kind of shift from. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing that really helped me, you know, you talk about like even powerful women, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I left, I was fortunate enough to start following people like Fatima, who's on here, the goddess of Tetris, who's popped by here. I don't know if she's here or not. And then meet up with new people, you know, like Gerber party of 6 that was on here earlier as well. And the one thing that I find within that, and listening and talking to those women, is realizing that they are not afraid to speak and refuse to follow the norm. And that was rare for me to see at any time in church, because any woman that did that in church was obviously ostracized, or, you know, talked with, you know, by the pastor or an elder or somebody to help them get straight, right? But I would say throwing somebody like yourself or any of those ladies I mentioned right now into a church right now would blow up the church, right? Right? It would be
Matter of fact, that's putting powder keg in there and releasing the clip off the grenade.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I love to be a fly on the wall to see it, or even just right there to see it, right? You know, because, and that's one of those things I wrestled early on with, even while I was in college, was a woman's role within the church. And I never understood how supposedly the Holy Spirit has specific things for men that are not for women, but supposedly the same Spirit lives in both.
Right.
And it just frustrated me, because even in the Old Testament, there were judges like Deborah who ruled Israel, right? Or spoke. I mean, there were times of female prophetess in the New Testament that spoke, you know, and yet we have this structure today in churches to where only men, like it's that old traditional power concept, only men are allowed to speak. And that just chaffs me. I just want to, pardon me, but sometimes I just want to punch someone in the neck. it just
you just wake the F up, please, you know, kind of thing. Because so what I, you know, it's basically, I just always been that question asked. I just been that, you know, question. And because that I spent most of my, I've got so many thoughts going in my head all at the same time. I've got to pick one. So this is what I did not get. When I got in my teens, what I noticed, my mother always told me to observe. So what I would observe is I would observe the people that would go to church on Sunday. And they're usually people that are in the neighborhood, and you usually can see what they're doing, you know, outside of wherever, how they move outside, if they're going to parties, if they're partying, or having, house parties or whatnot. And the husbands are coming home drunk, or, you just hear it's the neighborhood. And then on Sunday, they're holier than thou. They've done no wrong. They, when the pastor calls them to the altar to be forgiven for whatever they've done, nobody walks up. Nope, nobody, except for the people who are coming to, quote unquote, the Lord. Right? Okay. And that's what I noticed about a Baptist church. They would get people to come to the Lord, but then when you would go into Bible study or stuff, they wouldn't teach you the power of God and how to use it in your life. It stopped for me. I believe I used to ask my mother, why does it stop? Is this just a functioning to get everybody to realize that they're sinful creatures, that they need to come to the Lord, and then that's where it ends? There's nothing being taught after that. There's nothing being taught. And this was while I was in my teens, so that was maybe late 60s, late 60s, early 70s, right? So well, why am I there? If the church is the ultimate thing, is where you're going to grow up and you're going to learn all the do's and don'ts of life, God's way, then why does it stop with there? Why do you keep saying the same thing in Sunday school, right? And but then when I would go to other churches, it was like, oh, it's the same way. They're not meant to teach you anything about real life and how to apply the spirit, the true spirit of God in your life.
Yes. As a matter of fact, the educational system within the church, the only time it significantly grounds you and I don't want to say significantly grounds you, but it's the raising of the children, right? So you raise your children in the church, and I will call it a form of spiritual abuse. In a sense, you raise that child, they believe they're nothing without God, they're imperfect, they're dirty.
Right.
They kill Jesus. They don't get to spend time in heaven unless they ask Jesus into their heart, and then they'll be with their parents. Otherwise, they go to hell. So these kids don't have any cognitive ability with it. They just, boom, it's in there. All right? So when they get older, they're basically programmed to think only one way. Right? And that is within that box we talked about earlier. And the preachers only preach within that box. And so critical thinking is not something that is done within churches on a large basis. Okay? Because critical thinking pulls on that string that might let everything else kind of fall apart. And so the teaching you hear on Sundays, if there is a positive teaching, let's say, and not something that you're supposed to abstain from, which always seems to happen, right, is they hit, hey, you are powerful, you are strong because the Holy Spirit lives within you, but no one sitting in those chairs truly understands what that means, and a large part of it, because either A, they don't know how to experience it, or B, they don't want to put in the work for it, or C, they don't really technically believe it.
Right.
And so what happens is you have those kids that have grown up to be adults. They come in, they leave the church, they come back in when they have kids so they can reground their kids so they're good parents.
Right.
So they're doing something good, but they don't really know or have practiced a large part of what they're supposed to believe within their own lives.
Okay.
When they come back to the church, it's a sign of weakness to go up front in their minds, or they don't see they've done anything wrong because this is all they've known.
Right.
Say, okay, yeah, I could have done that better. That's not great, but that's not going to send me to hell because I have Jesus somewhere in me.
Right. Because Jesus has shed his blood and died for my sins, and I'm atoned,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
it's to get pass,
right,
right?
right,
And the Southern Baptist churches and a lot of non-denominational and a lot of other ones I know of also preach the eternal security path, right?
right,
And the only way they get around that, and the reason I say people are deconstructing and leaving the churches, they're doing it because they were never truly saved. And
right,
that's their loophole to get them out so they don't feel bad or have to answer the question, well, what really happened?
right, right. Because the whole idea is, I have to laugh because the whole idea that you think that people would say, well, I just can't believe in the Catholic Church and the priests and all those, and that they would ever do anything of what they did and be this godly, and how could they do such a thing? And these are this when I heard it, it was from very old friend of mine. Um, uh, from the church as we were growing up, but she grew up very into the church and very into, she would just argue with you to bring the point home. Yes, Adam and Eve, yes, they did, they did sin, and they got kicked out of Eden, and the snake was beguiling, and the whole story. And at first, of course, I didn't know anything back then about my egoic mind. Plus, I'm a Gemini. So you want to give me something, to argue with you about. Okay, I'm going to argue with you about that. Is I don't believe I was born sinful. And you're going to have, and she's going to have hers, and I'm going to have mine. But she couldn't believe that. She thought it was people making up stories about the Catholic Church. And she says, they're men of God. They would never think of to do anything like that. No, baby. And when you say the past, when I told her, I said, they're using God as their past to do that, because they're making in their head, they're thinking that it's okay because God, I'm a servant of God, and God must understand how I feel, that this need that I feel to be this way with either a little girl or a little boy. That's what they're sitting there doing. And the Christianity, whether you call it Catholicism or any of the other, it doesn't matter. It's not just Christianity, it's across the world in all of their faiths, that they get a pass. That somewhere the greater God that created everything understands the manhood of everything, and they've got a pass because they're doing God's work. And finally I had to, she was going to stand her ground. I was going to stand my ground. And it was like, I wasn't, as far as Christianity is concerned, I was not born sinful. My lineage didn't come down through Adam and Eve. With all these people on the earth, Adam and Eve couldn't have been birthing that many babies. I'm sorry. I just don't believe that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's and understanding, and I know you know this, but that whole descriptive of creation, everything, that is a poem. I mean, it's all societies, cultural societies, majority of them, let me just put it that way, have a story about how the world began.
Right.
Right? I personally do not believe in original sin either. And once the scary thing for Christianity as a whole is once you remove the original sin aspect, things really start to break down even more. All right? And kind of like, okay, that so-called sin entered the world, or whatever have you. Jesus supposedly died on the cross for sin. For humanity's sin, past, present, and future. And things start to really unravel when it comes to that, and how, Mary got pregnant. It's a whole nother story. So supposedly. So I totally agree. And then you emphasize something that was interesting, is you have people that are so, I don't want to use the word sold out, but I'm going to use that because that's a common Christian term, especially in the 90s. you have people that are so embedded in this that they are incapable of critical thinking. And then you have people like sheep, like you're encouraged to be within the scripture, the Bible, who literally will be, okay, yeah, this is a man of God and I'm going to follow him or her, mostly a him, as you know. And so they give this person all this power. Why do we give people, so-called religious people, all that power? Right? Mm-hmm. And I think you go back in history and you see, hey, kings grabbed it that way. Kings grabbed spirituality that way. You know, Constantine, whatever have you, set up this huge power structure where really, honestly, have any of those people today, pastors, and this is going to be really bad for me to say, but so what makes them the authority on scripture or sacred texts, right? They have gone to the, say, seminary, some of them, and learned a certain way based upon what that denomination wants them to learn, right? So they just cut and paste, right? Largely, yeah. Unless you're not national, then you're not a very good cut and paste. It's like it was just a little bit of a mistake here and there, and then you assume that even if someone doesn't have an education, that they have the Spirit of God in them, so they must be right. I guess it all breaks down for me is like, hey, I was once a pastor, and I know me. Can I give good advice sometimes? Sure. Can somebody else give better advice than me? Sure. Why do I have the power?
Right.
Because I got educated in a cookie cutter mold, right? What gives me the power to be able to look at a congregation of 2,500 people? I've worked in a congregation of 12,000 people. What gives me the power to look and go, oh, do this because God has called me to be the pastor, right? So you should listen to me because I have this colonial education and I've got God down to a bullet points of how he works, and therefore you need to listen to me. These people that hop up on stage, cut out pastors. I mean, they're just a lot of them just regurgitating what they learned. And it's interesting because you see, hey, are they living that life that they so-called claim? Are they any different than the person you said that goes out, the men that go out? They speaking the way they shouldn't be speaking supposedly and doing the things they supposedly shouldn't be doing, and they come right back on that pulpit. And a lot of times what you have is them pounding the podium saying, don't do this. And the reason why they're pounding that podium so hard is because they know in their life they're guilty of it.
Right.
But
right.
Accuse you of doing it.
Right.
Or something.
They're projecting.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, hey, I can't wait to get you on the couch, mister. Mm-hmm. Right. You pretty much want to put everybody else on the couch for asking and embodying question that will make sense to their deconstruction of what you've already taught them, right? That's basically it. Every time I didn't know, I know it now, that every time I would ask those embodying questions, I was deconstructing what was being taught to me on that Sunday. I was not taking it in full and going, oh, that must be me. They must be talking to me, that kind of thing. Oh, read scripture, this. Or, okay, now we want to instill fear in them. We're going to read a couple of passages from Book of Revelations. And we're going to read the ones that, the passages in the Book of Revelation that are going to make them fearful and keep them in line till they get back next Sunday.
Right.
That kind of thing. And then we'll go back to Matthew or Mark, or we might, go back into the Old Testament and soften it up a little so that they're not too fearful that they don't want to come back the next Sunday.
Well, and on top of that, you're right. I think that they sometimes, and you get the opposite where pastors don't speak on hardline issues, right? Mm-hmm. Because they upset the tithers, right? I mean, they've got to keep the money flowing, so they don't. A lot of them, like, let's say you're just free grace, right?
Right.
And so you don't handle a lot of the hard issues because you might upset somebody that gives a lot of money.
Right. Absolutely. I saw a lot of that in the church too. I saw, I saw, I remember seeing one time, and well, I was in a place where I shouldn't have been, and the adults were talking. And the thing was, my mother did not tithe that month because she had other bills that she had to take care of. And the idea, or the way, the perception, when it was not the pastor, it was the assistant pastor that, said, I just remember him saying something like, and you have to tithe regardless. So that meant, to me, what that was saying, my little mind, it was like, oh, mommy was supposed to allow the lights to get cut off, but tithe, or lights to gas, or one of the things that she went ahead and paid the bill for.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I was somewhere where I wasn't. I knew I wasn't going to ask my mother about the question about what the pastor had told her, because she didn't reply to him. She just kind of tilted her head and went, like that, and walked away. All right. It didn't mean that she agreed with him. It didn't mean that she disagreed with him. It just meant that that was her action that she took at the time. I wasn't in my mother's head, and I never asked her about it. But I'm here right now, so evidently she paid enough of the bills all the time. Right? But
you're not wrong on that. And I mean, behind the scenes, pulling back the curtain, okay? Whether it's an executive pastor, whether it's a pastor, whoever it is, whenever someone comes up, or a lot of times if there's an issue, or if it's a leadership thing, or whatever have you, they check to see who's tithing and how much they tithe. They will go out and have lunches for the big tithers, or with the big tithers, if they need to ask for more money or to keep them happy. They will look at leadership and literally say, hey, listen, you need to be tithing more. This is a sign that you're not as dedicated, right? And then you're right with your situation, your mom's situation. It's like, hey, have faith, tithe, God will provide. That's the end all be all, right? So
right.
If you're not tithing, that is a lack of faith in God, as they say. And it is something of some sort of hardness of heart that you have. So you better tithe, or else we're going to call you out on it.
Right. Right. And yeah. And I remember, I don't know if they did this in your church, but they always have, I think they called them the minutes of the church, before the pastor spoke, and after they got you feeling good with the music and everything. And of course, my mother was in the chorus, and I think we talked about how they marched down the church aisles, side to side, and they'd be rocking, and that kind of thing. And they get people feeling good, because the minutes of the day were about, I don't know if it happened in your church, but it was about who was doing or who was not doing what they should have been doing or should not have been doing. And that included tithing. It included giving of your time in service. If you joined the choir, if you joined, the widow, there were so many what do they call it? Auxiliaries, things that you should be in, and that whole kind of thing. It was literally, church was a whole day, right? It started early in the morning, 7:30. We had 6:30. I think it was like a 6:30 kind of prayer call, and then you come back and you'd have the first service at 7:30. And my grandmother used to sing at 7:30, and then you come back then they'd have a 11 o'clock. My mother sang at 11 o'clock. And look, for when I was little, up until I was 12, I mean, I was literally in that seat, for when my grandmother's, and the sermon was the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, definitely. And churches are notorious for wearing out volunteers. Notorious.
Right.
They will use their volunteers until they can't exist anymore, and then they'll find a different one.
Yeah, and if you're not volunteering, then you're guilted into it.
Yeah. Oh, we really need to. You know, the Lord's doing great work here. You know, would you pray about being a part of it? I see your gifts and talents and how they can fit into this role. I mean, you name it. You know, and oh, these children need you, right? Or these students need you. Or, man, you could impact 12 other people in a small group to bring them closer to God. Don't you want to do that? You know, I mean, like, the guilt that they roll out is very well planned.
Okay, well, I'm going to shift because I got a question that I know I want to ask you. It's two questions, okay? On one of your posts, I can't read it verbatim, but it talked about spiritual abuse and what it looks like. Okay, and that, well, I already know one of those abuses based on the Catholic Church and whatnot. But I think when you're talking about abuse, it's about how the person feels internally about how they've been subjugated, maybe, towards the religion once they're moving through and out of it. Is that the way it is, or is it?
There's different facets and levels of spiritual abuse, okay? I think the first one was what I'd kind of mentioned earlier. When you take a child, we'll just start with children first. When you take a child and a child that is not able to critically think, their brain is not formed, right? They don't have that process or that capability, and you tell this child, all right, that God loves them, that Jesus loves them, but that they are inherently sinful or evil, that there's nothing good that they can do in and of themselves. The only good they can do is if Jesus lives in them.
Right.
And the reason why Jesus died on the cross is because of that child's sin, right? All humanity, but that child's sin. And if they don't come to Jesus, then they will spend eternity in hell away from their parents.
Okay.
What is a child going to do? All right. A child trusts the adults that they are placed with, or at least listen to them. And then you have parents at home that are saying the same thing as the Sunday school teacher or the small group teacher, whoever's teaching them. And suddenly this child, their brain waves and the way the brain works, the structure that's happening is being embedded upon them to where that's just the normal process that they go to, right? Whenever they think about it, because they can't critically think. Right. It's what they do. And so they grow up with this disappointment of self, never being able to celebrate because they're supposed to be humble.
Right.
That good that they did really didn't come from them, but God really cares about the sporting event they just did good in. And God should get the credit instead of them actually working their asses off. Right? And then they grow into these adults that are guilt-ridden possibly as well. Right? And then they start asking questions. And when they start asking questions, then you get the different kind of spiritual abuse that says, hey, no, you're asking the wrong questions. Don't you love God anymore? Here's this box. Don't go outside this box or God will be displeased. And if you go outside this box, you're going to lose your community.
Right.
In fact, when I left religion, and a lot of my clients have done the same, have this situation, I knew that my mother would never talk to me again, probably. And she considers herself a failure because of what I have become.
Right.
Spiritual manipulation, gaslighting, all of those different areas. Yeah, that's spiritual abuse.
Okay.
Basically, a spiritual belief and saying, if you ask questions or you don't adhere to this belief, then you're doomed.
Right.
Anything?
Then you, yeah. I'm not going to say I escaped that. I think about in my 30s when my mom passed, my mom, I think, was my barrier that allowed me to ask those questions, that allowed me to go outside of the box. So I was already outside of the box, but there were, by the time I got to, you know, becoming spiritually born again, right? Because I thought that was okay. That's a good path. You know, it was it seemed like a pretty progressive church from, you know, the small Baptists or Methodists or even the Holiness Church that I was going to. And this particular church, and it was easy because sometimes when I couldn't make the church, they were on TV, you know, and whatnot. So, you know, I said, and I would listen to the pastor speak and everything, and it sounded, to me, it sounded progressive. But to somebody else who's been indoctrinated from the time they were, you know, 5, and that's all they ever knew, that would have been too progressive. That wouldn't have even been a thought in their mindscape to even, you know, deal with this church. But it was, again, I think I went to this church maybe about 3 years. No, I don't even think that long. It didn't take very long for me to understand that here I was being patterned to instill fear and then indoctrinate as a born again Christian. It's like, born again Christian, you're dedicating your life back to Christ because at some point you failed, you dropped off Christ's radar. Now you're going to come back, and basically, I didn't think of this at that time, but basically it was like with your tail between your legs saying, you're right, I was wrong, you know. And coming back, rededicating my life and going into, when I would tell people about, you know, Christ and the blood of Jesus and the whole thing, first I would instill fear with them about telling them that what they're doing and how they're living life and that they're going to go to hell. And then you've got them in the fear base. Oh, but don't worry. Now all you have to do is believe on the blood of Jesus and give your life to Christ, and everything is hunky dory, right? And it didn't feel right. Why? Because I hadn't even begun to start living any part of my life as spiritually, you know, and I wasn't being taught any of the spiritual things to live life. And that's, once again, we're back to the Baptist background where they just get you in, but they don't give you anything to fill you up, to allow you to become a spiritually growing entity, living an authentic life, right? Yeah. And then I go, and especially my baby sister would run for me when I would show up. She would run the other way when I show up because she didn't want me to talk about Jesus. She didn't want me to talk about any of that stuff. And then when she came to the Lord, and she did her thing, when I was moving into finding a more, you know, okay, I've got to find this one-on-one with God. There's got to be. I hear it. I hear people talking about it. How can I get there? So I had to start deconstructing on my own. It wasn't like I went to a therapist. I didn't know, you know, I didn't know, how do you find out a spiritual therapist, or, you know, how do you know who's going to be right telling you what? I just kind of had to deconstruct on my own. And once I was deconstructing, the one thing that I lost for a little while was my baby sister, because she had came to the Lord, and I gained from that, her feeling that she felt like I was walking away from her, that finally she understood what I was saying. And then I'm moving on. And I think for a lot of people, this is the question that I want to ask, because I know we're almost out of time. um, is part of the deconstruction that you help people with is also learning how to, if you have to leave your family behind, how to adapt to that, because a lot of it is very hard to leave family behind, especially you've been with them your whole life. You know, there it is. They're your life.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and the fact that you're even put in that situation is terrible, right? Because the fact that religion plays that part to where you could lose your family for making a decision not to be part of a religion is incredibly sad. So I do a lot with that. A lot of clients have come through and had that challenge and that struggle that literally they're going to lose everything, right? They're going to lose this family. And so, yeah, I deal a lot with that. I want to call back to Fatima because she had a question on here. She says, where would you say are good environments to bring your children for spiritual, not religious, development and growth? I struggle thinking of how I'll navigate this part someday. I think that's an outstanding question. And I think, Fatima, I think one of the things that you can do, one of the things I tried to do, and I tried to do it even though I was in the church, which really were red flags that should have been going off in my mind. Right? So I would introduce them to the gamut, right? So we have talks about atheism, we have talks about Buddhism, we have talks about, when it comes down to it, okay? So in those different religions, I present what they believe, and I never put pressure on them to choose one or the other. And throughout those years of development, I just always ask them questions. So I'm trying to teach them to critically think. Even though they're not fully developed in the brain, I'm trying to at least teach them the process of, hey, well, what do you think about that? And, what do you believe about that? Is there another option? Is there not another? I'm always engaging them so that they know that if they have a question about something, they can come talk to me and know that I'm going to probably do a Socratic method, like ask them a question back, because I never want to impress my beliefs or non-beliefs upon them as an individual. And I always warn them, if there's somebody trying to do that, then those are the people you stay away from, because it's their journey. And so as far as spirituality, I think it's more of the aspect of us as parents to take the reins in that and give them the big picture of everything instead of the small picture, and see how they develop and let them decide. Because what happens is when we don't and we tell them what to believe about certain religions, we are basically putting them in a box. Some people may be spiritual, like one of my children, I think, is more spiritual, doesn't believe necessarily in any one particular religion, but believes there's something more.
Right.
That's that child's journey. I'm not going to say, well, no, you're wrong for thinking that. I'll continue to ask questions just so they continually constructively think, right? And then in that process, religion or spirituality becomes safe, because
right.
Not being told what to do.
Right. Or not being told what to do or how to do it, or given somebody else's perception of why to do it.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, this is my perception. This is why I do what I do. Now, just like my mom did, okay, go figure out the rest, because you don't necessarily have to do it someone else's way. You don't have to do it my way. You don't have to do it your dad's way. You don't have to do it, the pastor's way. I remember as a kid, I did not like when the pastor would hug me. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't as sexually. It was
no, but I love that. I love that for you, because I learned that very quickly. My daughter feels uncomfortable around certain people. I never told my daughter that she should hug them.
Right.
That's one of those things that's taken, I think, from from women in church is that intuition, that understanding that says, hey, if it's a catch here and I don't feel comfortable doing that, listen to that and do it. I'd also like to comment, Fatima said, hey, instead of going on a Sunday thing, field trips. I think field trips are great because not only do you say, hey, this is what, they do, this is how they experience things, but it also fits within history. Why did this come about? Where did this come? And it's great for questioning and learning.
Right.
And so I think that's great, Fatima.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's one of the things that irks me whenever I talk to the clients or people and they have trouble gaining back that what you have, that trusting themselves to believe or to feel or to feel, that person's not safe. Let me tell you something. Women's instincts
pretty much
grab them.
Right. They're
right
out on where when allowed for it to be used. Just it's energy that was meant to be used. I mean,
yes.
Men have the same instinct. They're just told and taught that that they use it for business, but it's not necessarily for spirituality. Because spirituality and religion isn't a far jump from each other. Spirituality is a oneness with you and God, right? And religion is just the schooling of that. It's just a religion is the place you can go to be together in communion with the oneness between you and God as a whole, right?
Yep.
And they got it all whacked. And I pretty much kept this whole podcast clean. So,
I'm sorry.
I just did, me, the last podcast we had, my mouth, I'm a sailor, but, but it's just men have that instinct too. They just turn it off it's been turned off for a long time. They even have this instinct to know when they're doing something wrong or when a person is uncomfortable around them. They do have that instinct. They turn it off and they turn on the other part of them that says, well, I'm the glory of God. I'm representing the glory of God, and everyone should not mind me touching or breathing on you or bringing you close in when you smell sweaty after doing 2 hours of speech in a robe, like on top of your suit, that kind of thing. And I used to tell my mother, I said, I don't like when he hugs me. He stinks. And my mother would say, okay, well, it would always be he would hug me because when she was in service singing, all the kids had to come up and take a picture with their parents and the pastor. And it would be always some way that I would be vibrationally in his parameter where he would just grab me and hug me. Come here. Right.
That's not disturbing at all.
No, it's not. It was like, I mean, he might have hugged a couple of other kids, but it was like, so finally what my mother did is she finally, and I don't know if she did it on purpose or it was just that way, but I have a feeling she did it on purpose. So the side that I would stand on normally to take a picture, she moved me to the other side. So I would stand between her and another woman in the choir.
Nice.
Right?
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
She never ever said to me, this is what I'm doing. It just always, after that point, it would be, I'd always stand there, and she never said anything. She never said anything to the pastor to cause any kind of drama or anything. She just moved her child out the way.
I love the fact that your mom listened to you like that. I mean, she really, she listened to you and she says, hey, how can I help my girl through this? Right. So I love that. I do want to call because he's made a couple comments. A Finnish Humanity, I'm sorry. AF Finnish Humanity, if I totally butchered that, I'm terrible with these things. Thanks for being here, and thank you for the kind comment. I appreciate that as well. So that being the case, most parents would just tell their kids, don't worry about it, and just leave them right there,
Yeah, but like I said, again, my mother was outside of the box because she was not anybody that, she did not get remarried. Matter of fact, she did not get remarried to my stepdad. She did not marry my father. So she was out of the box because she had already had 2 kids later in life that were out of wedlock. So come on,
Yeah.
she's already pushing the church boundaries.
Sure.
The thing is, I'm looking at, why is she still even there? And one day she was joking, and it was once again, I was a kid. It was an adult conversation, and she was joking to my grandmother and my grandmother's boyfriend, who was a live-in boyfriend. So my grandmother and mother were already outside of the box of what a good Baptist woman was, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You living in sin.
in right? And they were joking, and I remember hearing, I don't remember who said what to my mother, and my mother was laughing, and she says, "Oh, they just keep me around for my voice in the choir," and but it always stuck there. They had a need for her, so they overlooked her in a manner, I'm quite sure, because I would always hear my uncles take up for my mother when the pastor and the assistant pastor would have issues. And my uncles did not go to the same church my mother went to. They went to a different, so they could stand up for her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Had happened in their church, who knows? Maybe they would have a different, but then my uncles were also the kind that would, they did their beers, and they they did the ponies, as they called it, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think my mom she was just being outside the box, not even thinking about being outside the box.
Yeah.
And then here comes this little girl of hers. I don't know. I know me because I know how I perceived my life and perceived how my mother and I's relationship. I don't know about my sister and brother's relationship, but we were all, church wasn't our favorite thing. It was like, we would fight you for the 2 hours that we had to go. It's like, do we have to go? It would be the same every morning. And my mother would say, "You got, 10 minutes to get in your Sunday best, and we're going." And we didn't want to know what happens after 10 minutes. Okay. So we were in, and we went, and what she did was, where they would put all the other kids, and literally all the other kids in church when we were growing up had I think we had 6 rows, because all the adults were in the front, because the kids couldn't, after we come from Sunday school, the kids have to sit there and be quiet. Yet my mother gave us coloring books, and so we had a quietness. Of course, that there is outside the box too, because they wanted us simultaneous listening to what was being said, even though we didn't understand it, because they were pre-training us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in church to where if the teenagers, middle schoolers, anything like that were being at all disruptive, the pastor would stop his sermon and call them out. Right?
Who do you think always got called out?
You.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Because either I was asking a question about what he had just said, because I don't know about you as a pastor, but pastors seem to use big words that nobody ever uses in regular conversation.
Well, remember, they very rarely left me on stage. Number one, because I hated it. Number two, I always said things that were controversial. So okay. It's like, let's put him back with executive pastor, small group pastor, whatever have you. Boom.
Boom.
Let's keep him off that stage, because He's always talking about whores or something. I don't know what he's talking about, but it's always bad.
Yeah, it's all, but they never talk about themselves.
Now, see, that's where I differ.
You know,
All right. I differed because I would always talk to people about how screwed up I was. Right. I'm just like one of those open book people. It's like, oh, here comes Brad. He's going to talk about all the ways he sucks. Right?
and I think like I said, I think my mother was that one that gave me the permission to go ahead and keep thinking outside the box. When she passed away, of course, I went into, I did not address death well. Right.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I went in listening to others about spirituality, about religion, about death, about, I think that was the perfect time for people to start downloading. Or no, I'll put it better this way. The downloads were already there. They just weren't prevalent because my mother was allowing other things to cover it up and layer it up in understanding and wisdom and that kind of thing. But once she was gone, she was no longer my barrier to allow me to think and say those things out loud in church. Plus, I was always I was an adult, so I should know better. Don't make waves. Don't rock the boat. Don't step outside. Don't color outside the lines. Don't knock down the prefabricated box that we've already got for you because it's built perfectly to keep you in. And so while I was getting over my, dealing with the loss of my mom, a lot of that her layers that she helped put just kind of peeled away to the layers that were already downloaded. And that was already a running process. And literally I had to, I never had to deconstruct with my mom because nothing was there to deconstruct.
Right.
So I got, into my mid-30s and all through my 40s. It was like, okay, now I have to figure out who I am at life. I have to start peeling back the onion, the whole kind of thing. And man, I'm going to tell you, the shit that would come out my mouth for the Lord, I'm going, I did this to people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I
sat back and I told them that they were going to go to hell and that the blood of Jesus is going to save them. But I didn't believe it. I didn't know if I believed it, but I said it. Do you know what I mean? Well, I knew I didn't believe it because we figured that out when I was, a child and a teenager. It was like, oh, holy shit, and then that was my favorite term. And in my born again Christian stage, when I was going to Crenshaw Christian Center, they used to always chastise me. It was like, don't curse in the house of the Lord, because they would say stuff and I would read things in the Bible and then a thought would come in that just would override it. And I go, holy shit, really? You mean this? You mean this stuff? And the teacher would go, you can't say that. You can't say that in the house of the Lord.
But I can say it outside the house of the Lord.
Yeah. But when I stepped outside, I can't believe it. That stuff. I'm not going to tell my kids this. Talk to my kids about what their Sunday school lesson was. And I would do that. And I would go, okay, you've got to think about this. Ask a question about that. Does it seem right to you? How do you feel about that question? What does it make you feel? Right? So I started deconstructing. I started kind of projecting that out to my children to go, if my mother did this for me, not knowing she was doing this for me, not on purpose, just because she was a mother, she was just leaning towards that. What can I do purposely to allow my kids to have freedom enough to decide what first, if they even want to deal with religion, second, if they even want to deal with spirituality. third, that they can know that there's something out there greater than themselves and not have to put a name on it. And that's all they have to believe. And that's good enough too. Right.
Right.
So, man, I don't think they're ready for us. I don't think I could walk back in and say the things I say, because literally you'd want to be a fly on the wall if we both got up there in the pulpit. I love how you call the pulpit a stage. Whenever they would say pulpit, I would get these chills that would like scare the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just meant
it is a stage, and it goes back to my thought about what qualifies them to be up there, what qualifies them to have leadership over my life. And a lot of times I know how sermons work. I know the strings that are pulled. I know unfortunately, the manipulation that takes place to draw them to a certain point, both with the music and with the sermon all woven together. How manipulative it is. I don't look at it as a pulpit. I look at it as a stage.
Right. It is. It really is. Even down to they play the music before you get in there, keep you happy, joyful. It's up in the air, and then right before they get past as I back in. You're bringing up so many memories that makes me laugh, because they call it pass the plate, right?
Yeah.
And they sing the most happy, joyous song, and Jesus' name is in it, like throughout all of the song. They find the song that has Jesus' name in in every line, every verse. And then they pass the plate, and then, they have the choir walk down and they bounce down back and forth, and and your whole thing. And then you have the ushers, they have the beautiful little gloves on, passing the plate, and they wait at you to just pass it down, and that whole kind of thing. So it's like, it's all very manipulated. People don't want to hear it. They don't want to know that they're being manipulated. But the thing is that organized religion is very connected to the political arena, because they want you to follow them in whatever they're telling you that they believe is right for you.
Yes.
For your greatest good.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're back to square one with women not being able to choose for their body whether they want to have a abortion or not, regardless of whether it's, if it's just they made a mistake, they got pregnant and they want to abort before I don't even know what the weeks is. The religion is going to help you tell, or help you decide that it's okay that this law in place is for your greater good.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The whole thing, I remember my aunt saying, because she went to Catholicism, and she said, well, it's not right that in church, if you decide to stop having children, you can't get your tubes tied. Back in, when I was maybe between 6 and 10 when I used to go off and on with her. But I even remember back then, and I think that was early 60s, that, that statement was made, that the reason why she was not going to go and do Catholicism anymore was because they taken away all her choices for her own body.
Yeah, it's all about power.
It's all about power. Yeah.
And politics.
And nobody wants to, they do want to put it two and two together, but it's only they only want to do it as a conspiracy theory, right? And, because they want to talk about it. Okay, do you believe this? Do you believe this? But once you say it's truth, then everything falls away,
Right.
Yeah. And you start really critically thinking about the higher power and what you assess the higher power to be for you. For me, I stopped going to church because church is a building. Source is within me, but I don't tell anybody else to go do that. My family says, "You don't go to church anymore?" No. What's wrong with you? Because God's not in the building. He, she, it, they are everywhere. So why should I be tied to one building, right? But what's right for me is not right for somebody else until that somebody else figures it out. But they have to do the same work that I had to do from 30 to right now. I've been just deconstructing myself, and the fact that I found that word on your page, that's what I've been doing to find out my authentic me. And it took some time.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes wonder if we're ever really done deconstructing.
No,
you know,
I really don't, because even though my mother was my pathway or my you know, my shield, and you know, what she was helping me pull back layers that I didn't know I was pulling back, because I was just this, where other people was thinking that I was this obnoxious kid with all these questions. She was the one that was allowing those questions to pull back my layers. She was allowing me to deconstruct at a very young age. But like I said, when she passed away, all of those layers that were already downloaded and encoded on us from generation to generation, they started, you know, taking, you know, my egoic mind, I didn't know it was my egoic mind then, started playing the recording continuously. And when I got out of line, or when I stepped outside of the you know, the prefabricated box, or the color line, or, you know, that was comfortable for it and for society, then I got this message. And the messages had been there so long that they're distorted. So when I, you know, as I was deconstructing, I was making sure that my kids were deconstructing with me, but not deconstructing. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, I know what you mean.
Because they were born with free will.
Yes.
So, you know, options. Showing what mom's doing, and you can choose, you know, you can do the same thing I did. I mean, literally, when my kids they didn't do it as young as I did it. They were, I think when they turned 16, they all went their own ways and figured out what they needed to do. They'd come back and they'd talk to me about it, and that whole kind. But the one part about deconstructing that was the hardest, because of the mind control sometimes, you know, when they chose it, being there to allow it.
Mm-hmm.
When I mean being there, I mean spiritually being there to allow it, without being in my mind to say no. Like my ex-husband at that time he still is Jehovah's Witness. So anytime my daughter would go with him to whatever they call their thing, I don't think they call it church, they call it something else. I would always, and she would come back and she would talk to me about this stuff, and she'd be really enthused. My inner mind was, or my inner mind was going, oh shit, she's going to become Jehovah's Witness, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like that, judging that instead of listening to it and allowing.
Yes.
Who says you don't need a church to talk source? You know, some people still do, as they're deconstructing, as they're moving through their for me, I just call it my what do you call it, spirit. You know, it took a while for me to, like, monumental grace for me to say no more church. And it was literally one day I had to work one Sunday, and I wanted to go to church. I wanted to go and hear the service only. And I went to take my kids out of class. So I got my oldest two first, and I went to get my youngest. And when I went to get her out of class, church wasn't over. What I did was I left church when they started inviting people in to receive Christ or whatever, that kind of thing. So I left, they, at that time, they'll open the doors and you can go. So when I got to my youngest son's daycare, or not daycare, but Bible study care, I stuck my head in. I, asked the teacher to come over, and I asked her if she would get my son. And as she walked back over, she got him, and she gave, he had everything in hand. And as she's handing me to him, she turns to her class and she tells the class to tell Miss So-and-so what we do, what happens when we interrupt class. Okay. It wasn't, you as an adult talk to me. She turned around and she had the students reprimand me for interrupting the class. I was like, what the, right? That was my thinking. That was my thinking. And I just went, what did you just do? No, I said to her, and my little flower words wanted to come out so bad. You could see my face. My son said my face was purple. I was just like, what did you just do? Did you just have your class reprimand me for picking up my son because I have to go to work? I mean, I just kind of went there.
Yeah.
And then the Gemini me came out, because now Gemini me is going to go back, a couple of months and go this and this and this. And she didn't deserve the whole gambit of that. But it's like, you can't even get in the church to be in the church because they do the TV version, and you have to go sit in another room that's not even in there, that kind of thing. And everybody wants to be on TV. All I want is whatever the word of God is coming out of the pastor's mouth. That's it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my golden nugget that told me, okay, any church, any four walls is not where God is at, or where source is at. Source is everywhere. So I'll just, do me. And that was part of, the deconstruction part, because you're told that you got to get up on Sunday, you got to wear your Sunday best, you got to look your best, and you got to get there early, and you got to sit in the right seats to be seen by anybody who's anybody. And I'm going, well, that's not, I'm there to hear from God.
Yeah.
And as the deconstructive part of that started to happen, the good Sandra came back, the one that was going to say, okay, I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to just, let me use some of my flowery words. You guys have, effed up really bad. You guys need to, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the control, right?
Yeah. You know what? We have been here 2 hours. I hope I have not pushed you back in any of your.
That's okay. I'm pretty flexible, but I've loved our conversation. So. Right.
I have loved it too. And, I haven't covered this whole thing, but we got over a lot of it. So I'm going to let you know that I am going to invite you back, because there's so much more, about, deconstruction, especially for men. It's not easy for men to come out of the church, mentality and do it easily. So
it's a different animal, but for men it's a little bit different. I have a little bit different take because I was actually a pastor, so that has a little bit different take. But I love your perspective. I love what you've had to say. I love the fact that you grew up with a parent like that. I love the fact that you have critically thought through so much, and how strong a person has to be to do that. So thank you for sharing all that.
Thank you. The conditioning that we've, this is the whole idea that this is preconditioned into us from generation to generation. That's a magnificent feat all on its own.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
That once upon a time, and I'll use that as a story, once upon a time, it could have been just a small group of people said, oh, we're going to have to put this in check, because they thought about the fact that one day we'll be here with 8 billion people on the world, and we've got to control them.
Their system is incredibly efficient, which is why they're so against anything changing.
Anything changing. Right. Right. And even as we're moving into quote unquote spirituality, a lot of us move into spirituality, but we bring those conditional biases with us from Christianity or I'll just say organized religion, because
Right.
It's not just Christianity, into our spiritual what we call our spiritual center. And it's about, when you get there, you start seeing, what I started seeing was, debugging everything, really, kind of breaking down all those barriers. Well, wait, I'm still acting like I was acting when I was in my 30s, allowing, people to tell me and their perception of me, and basically telling me when I got divorced, and this is the same thing they told my mother. And then I saw, no, we got some work to do, because it was the women in the church that were telling me, oh, Sandy, you can't raise your kids on your own. You're going to have to find a God-fearing Christian man,
Yeah.
And, you're going to, let us set you up with some, and I was still grieving my mother. So it was easy for them to come in with that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
easy to latch on to it, because I wanted my mother. And some of these women knew her, right?
Yeah.
And even though some of them had moved from the Baptist to a born-again Christian, they knew her. So it was easy for them to say, oh, I'm in my 30s. And they kept setting me up with, Christian men who were in their 50s and 60s. And it was like, that would work, but they wanted to take the raising of my children out of my hands. And it was like, no, first, you're not their dad. And second, you're not going to raise my child for me when I can raise my child all on my own. So that's when I had to go, oh, this has got to change. I see why my mother never relinquished that I want to call it, it's strength play to someone else.
Right.
And it was me, it was like, no. But I wrote my own story in that. So I didn't date any older Christian guys, but I dated younger guys that didn't want anything to do with relationships. So I was always in a relationship until it was fun and it was over. But I started writing that story.
Sure.
And that wasn't a happy story either for my greater good or my kids' greater good, but definitely not for the person that I was using as a male play toy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's great you recognize all that. Once again, that's great critical thinking, right? I mean, so I commend you on that. That's awesome.
Thank you. And I hope you will come back, because we do have some more to talk about. Maybe sometime in April we can work.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And we will start with the difference between male and female deconstruction, because I know it's got to be, that's powerful vibration.
Yes.
On every level. Men that are told that there is no way that they can even think of emotion, and women who were told that this is the way it's always been, submit. So that's gonna.
I'm game. So you just tell me when, and I'll be there.
All right. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody in the feed. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm about what we're talking about. And we are going to have Brad back again in April. So look forward to the flyers. They will be going out. I know March is, 30 days of March, but before you know it, April will be here.
It will be. It'll be here fast. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I loved our conversation.
Oh, thank you. Be blessed.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining Soul Conversations with Sandra. And, are you gone yet?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay. Would you give them your email address or how they can contact you?
The easiest way to contact me is to go to my IG page, shoot me a DM. And I'm really good at answering my DMs. You can also get a hold of me through Coaching with Brad, and that's my website. And so either of those are fine. Love to hear from you. I'm always up for a good conversation.
Oh, great. And he has some great podcasts as well. I mean, when I heard the first one, I'm in the right place at the right time. Let me listen. And let me kind of like, let me like his page and, make sure so I'm really thankful and grateful that Christian kind of, orchestrated us all getting together and having contact,
Yes.
A wonderful.
That was awesome. Yeah. Yep. Very much so.
Right. Okay. And you guys, if you are just starting to follow me, you can go to my bio, click my social tab. It's called Social tab. And you can find me. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Spotify, iTunes, and am I forgetting one? Yes, Facebook and TikTok. So you can go to my page to find out where I am. So everyone, be blessed. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.